He's the Eternal that lived on Hercules' couch. We're talking about Gilgamesh. Hi, I'm Nando, and in these videos I take a character from Marvel Comics. I talk about their background, their power set, their personality, and give you some reading recommendations. And this is all because this character is appearing this week into the collectible card game Marvel Snap. So if you always want to learn about this character, you just maybe were curious, this video is for you. And then at the very end, we talk about the Marvel Snap stuff. This week, we're talking about one of the Eternals. You would kind of assume, based on the fact that they are the season pass card here, they are the main Eternal, but they very much are not. But we're going to talk about an Eternal who you may remember from the movie. His name is Gilgamesh. Very quick introduction to just the idea of the Eternals, because it's a little different in the comics versus in the movies. In the movies, the Eternals are like basically robots sent to different planets. Each planet gets their own Eternals, and they exist to cultivate life on the planet and fight the deviants, who the Celestials also put there, until the planet can be like consumed by the Celestials and they can continue, spreading life throughout the universe. In the comics, it's a little different, although it has evolved a lot over time. Basically, the Celestials, the big cosmic god guys, came to Earth millions of years ago and did experiments on 3 groups of people. One became the Deviants, and they were monster guys, and they went and lived underground and dug holes and were just evil and bad and different, right? That was their whole deal. And you're probably saying, well, that's a weird way to characterize the villains, because the Deviant, that's the bad guys, right? And like, they frequently are the bad guys, although the Eternals branch out a lot, and the whole Eternals Deviant thing does serve as like this way to understand what the Eternals are doing. A lot of the time the Eternals are fighting other Eternals. That seems like it's most of what I've been reading so far. But anyway, so the Deviants exist. And like I said, monster guys. Humans are created as part of this, I believe. Although I don't know if that may have been retconned a bazillion times. But then 100 people are given incredible superhuman powers, and they are known as the Eternals. They are beings that you would say they're eternal. They can't die. That's like a technicality. They can die. There's ways to kill an Eternal, but usually they either can just will themselves back to life, or they have a machine that will revive them, so they usually don't die. So the Eternals start on Earth. One of the big differences between some of the Eternals and other Eternals is some want to procreate, but they can't with other Eternals, but they can with people. And that ends up being the big difference between the Eternals and the Deviants. The Deviants, there's many of them, because they are able to procreate very quickly. Like, there's lots and lots and lots of Deviants, but they're not that special. They're like monster guys. Whereas there's a couple of Eternals. They cannot make more Eternals the same way the Deviants can. And it's this little competition of like who's gonna win in the fight for Earth and stuff. And we'll get to what Arisham's deal is in a future video, but Arisham is the Eternal who's gonna show up and judge the planet whether they have succeeded or failed. I promise there's like a mission that the Eternals are doing, but I just don't know what it is. So like I said, some of the Eternals want to expand the Eternal group by having children with people of other, species, races, whatever you want to call it. And they go off and form the Titans, which will eventually lead to Thanos. So that's why he has like deviant in him. He's part deviant, but like Thanos is part Eternal. But most of them stay on Earth. And they've got all these names where you're like, that's kind of like a Greek god name or something, right? Circe, not a god, but witch, but you know what I mean. Athena, Phastos, the version of Hephaestus, right? Like, they're all a letter or two off. They are legally distinct from the Greek or Roman or Sumerian or whatever gods. It's funny, in universe, there actually are those gods, as we've seen, right? Zeus exists. In fact, in the comics, Athena, the Eternal Athena, is not originally named Athena. She's named something else. But when the Olympian gods, like the actual Greek gods that exist, show up and they're like, hey, are you guys like stealing our whole thing? And then the Eternal's like, no, sorry, this is misunderstanding. And as a way to show our respect to you, we will name this one after you. So she'll be Athena. Isn't that great? And for some reason, that solves the problem. So like again, Mercari, like is Mercury. See, it's complicated, right? Because all of these Eternals have existed since millennia ago. And they were all created by Jack Kirby in this very expansive comic with lots of lore. And a lot of this time since then has been spent trying to fit them into the Marvel universe and figure out like what they do, what these comics are for. I would say the writer who had the best luck with that was probably Neil Gaiman. I would say Neil Gaiman, and then Kieran Gillen recently reinvented a lot of their lore in a way that works. But it's always been a property that Marvel's had trouble with. But it was the thing, Jack Kirby, when he came back to Marvel after working in DC and not really having any luck there, was like, I really want to make this. This is kind of what the Fourth World was, Darkseid and all that. this will be the new that for Marvel. It'll be these cool, big, godlike figures that'll fight. And Marvel's like, absolutely, we just want you back. You can do whatever you want. And this wasn't incredibly popular. Obviously, you probably have not heard of these characters, or at least, you know, you hadn't before the movie came out. This wasn't like, you know, you watched the Spider-Man cartoon and then the Eternals cartoon after it. Like, they didn't hit, but they're interesting. And they're used to fill in a lot of Marvel history. So let's look at Gilgamesh specifically. He's one of the Eternals. His name is Gilgamesh. He's also known as the Forgotten One. But his deal is he just likes to do human stuff. And he has stats that are maxed out to strength, because all the Eternals have like a variety of superpowers. They can fly, you know, super speed, super strength, psychic abilities, laser beams or whatever, but they don't do all of it. What they do is like a skill tree. They min-max stats so that this is the strong Eternal, and this is the fast Eternal, and this is the one that's good at fighting, and this is the one that's good at transmuting stuff. So like they technically did all have the superpowers at one point, but because of the specializations that they've all gone through, certain ones are better at certain things than others. Gilgamesh, besides one or two that show up very late in the game, is basically the strongest Eternal. And he's a figure who, if you're like a, you know, nerd like me, you've heard of this guy before, Gilgamesh. He was a Sumerian king of legend. He and Enkidu went and fought monsters and stuff. So in like universe, that was this character. This guy from the Eternals went down and was the legend of Gilgamesh. He hung out with Atlas. He hung out with Hercules. He, more than any other Eternal that I could see in these stories, like decided to just enjoy fighting and being a god and stuff. So like characters, he'll meet a character and go, hey, Hercules, remember when we did that thing back in the day? Those labors that I did and you took credit for, oh, Hercules. You know, that's the relationship Gilgamesh has with these characters. And Gilgamesh is really strong. Like, he's fought Hercules, the Hulk, Thor. He almost kind of picked up Mjolnir. That's pretty good. But okay, so why is Gilgamesh first here? Well, this probably isn't why, but I think the best reason is because Gilgamesh represents something very integral to what the Eternals were, which was they tried to make Gilgamesh happen and it didn't work. And what I mean is they took him and put him on the Avengers for a little while. Gilgamesh was part of the Avengers right alongside characters like Thor, having adventures, fighting monsters. They're like, oh my god, Gilgamesh, he's so strong. We've never seen a man this strong and eternal. Oh my god, this is incredible. And he'd be like, yes, I fought in all those ancient wars. Me and you, Thor, were very similar. People that like Thor should like me the same. Like, and it never worked. He got punched really hard in a fight with the Lava Men and Blastar, went into what is essentially an Eternal's coma, and eventually he was killed by Immortus. But like, that was kind of his contribution to the team. He was around, the characters knew he was a legendary figure, he was very strong, he helped them fight, but he never made a huge impression. And this is a problem, obviously, that the Eternals had as a big book and also as individual characters, because the next time they were relevant was the early 2000s with the Neil Gaiman stories. So in the Neil Gaiman story, Sprite, the little child Eternal, lost it after a million years of being a child, and used part of the power of the dreaming celestial, Tiamat, to make every Eternal forget their heritage and their normal lives around the world. So it was basically one of those stories where the Eternals were like, what am I doing? I feel like I have some sort of magical history, but this doesn't make any sense. I've never remembered any of this before. And then someone would meet him and be like, you're an Eternal, your name's Makari. And he'd be like, oh my god, I'm an Eternal. That was the story. And Druig, the main villain of the Eternals, because again, a lot of these stories are Eternals fighting other Eternals, starts to recruit a team of evil Eternals to fight these good Eternals for control over all of the Eternals. And each of the Eternals lives some normal life now. Gilgamesh is a strong man in a circus in Brazil named O Guerrero, which I guess means the warrior. Ajax woke him up, he got in a fight with all the rest of the Eternals, fought Athena, destroyed the regeneration pod that Makari was in. That's kind of the most important thing he did in that story. Again, cool looking, right? Kind of looks like a Crossbones, the Punisher kind of looking guy. He's the Eternal of that. And yes, he is very strong. The most recent Eternals run, or one of the most recent Eternals runs, was the Kieran Gillen Eternal run. I'm only saying was because there have been different iterations of it. And like, I feel like especially that book would have like Eternals, Thanos, and Eternals, this other story. And then they did the Judgment Day event. But love Kieran Gillen, one of my favorite writers, wrote a story that really kind of tried to streamline some of this Eternals lore. It was told from the point of view of the Machine, which I thought was very fun. So in that story, Zoras, the king of the Eternals, is killed, and all the rest of the Eternals try to investigate it. And obviously, their first suspect is Gilgamesh, because he's a bad guy and mean Eternal, and he's basically like, I didn't do it. And that's pretty much it. Like, I think if you asked me, or someone who's like a fan of the Eternals comics, to just name Eternals, I think you would name almost every other Eternal in the movie before you get to Gilgamesh. Like, that's how inconsequential in the big picture he is. Like, he's tough, and he's a formidable character, but like compared to Cersei, or Athena, or Icarus, or Makari, like he's just not on that level. The most interesting thing to me about Gilgamesh is his friendship with Hercules. So in the 2015s, I want to say, there was a Hercules comic. There have been a couple of Hercules comics. Like there was Herc, which we talked about in my Hercules Spotlight. Following that, Hercules shacked up in Brooklyn, I want to say, or something like that, and fought monsters. And the whole thing with that was everybody in the comics didn't like Hercules. Not because he was bad at fighting monsters, but because he was known as like a drunk and a guy who sleeps around, and he would cause a lot of damage and destruction. So like if a monster started attacking you or something, you would cross your fingers and hope for Iron Man. And if you got Hercules, you would run away. I mean, I guess you run away anyway because it's a monster, but it's like New York, so everybody just waits a block away to see what happens. And like Hercules shows up and they're like, oh, Hercules. Gilgamesh lives on Hercules' couch for this because, again, they're friends from back in the day. They had a lot of big adventures together, and Hercules has his life together. He's trying to get over all these negative stigmas regarding his alcoholism and, you know, the damage and destruction that he does. Gilgamesh is just like depressed, and he lives on Hercules' couch, doesn't really want to do anything, and he's Hercules' friend. Hercules is like, well, this is my buddy, so obviously I'm going to take care of him, but, you know, I hope he like gets up on his feet and like, you know, goes and fights a monster because he loves that. And he does eventually go and fight a monster, and he teams up with Hercules to fight these new gods that are pretty much just the American gods from that comic. But like, it's a completely different Gilgamesh, I feel like, than I've ever read before, but it is immediately the most interesting version of Gilgamesh. In the MCU, Gilgamesh was played by Ma Dong-suk, aka Don Lee, who you may know from Train to Busan. His Gilgamesh is very different from comic Gilgamesh as far as I can tell. He lives with Athena, he's kind of her caretaker. At least the time I watched this, I couldn't remember if we were supposed to read them as like a romantic relationship or they're just friends and she needs someone to like be there for her because she has the mad weary disease or whatever. You know, I guess you could say the one thing about him is he's relatively quiet, right? He's not like Kingo, say, who's constantly talking. And like some of the Eternals do have different personalities. Like Icarus is all business. Gilgamesh is kind of also all business, but he's more just kind of chill. He also is super strong. He's the Punch Eternal. Each of the Eternals, while like I said, they all have some level of superpowers in the movie, they have also like min-maxed their stats, so he maxed out on Punch. Spoilers for the Eternals movie, he's the one that dies, gets killed by Crow midway through the movie, which again, because he's not that expensive, makes total sense. But yeah, I doubt we'll see Gilgamesh again, which, you know, kind of a shame because I like Don Lee, like I think he's cool, but as far as the character goes, I think that was enough, and I, you know, think he got some cool punches in, and that was it. So my reading recommendation for all these guys is going to be the most recent Eternals run, written by Kieran Gillen, with art by Esad Ribic, Matthew Wilson, and VC's Clayton Cowles. It's not just good for an Eternals book, it's just a really good comic, and I think the art on that run is gorgeous, and I think it characterizes all these guys pretty interestingly. You're also welcome to go back and read the old Jack Kirby stuff, but I do think, especially for Gilgamesh, I wouldn't recommend it because he's not a big player in that. If we had an Icarus card, which for some reason we don't, even though he is as close as they usually have in the comics to a main character, I'd say maybe read that for him, but Gilgamesh doesn't play too far into it. Then for Gilgamesh specifically, read that Hercules book from 2015. It's written by Dan Abnett, with art by Luke Ross, Guru EFX, and Joe Sabino. It's fun. It's like kind of silly, and it leads into a story that kind of got upended by Civil War II, a comic no one really likes, but the beginning stuff I think is fun. And it's also a good Hercules book. I like Hercules. Like, I think if you haven't ever read a Hercules book, this is also worth it for that. So in Marvel Snap, Gilgamesh is a 5 cost, 7 power with the on reveal effect, plus 1 power for each of your other cards in play with increased power. And like this sometimes changes, maybe it'll be a 5/8 when he drops or something, but as of a week or two before the card gets released, that's what we're working with. I have no idea what they were going for with this, but besides, I guess that he is strong, so he becomes more strong. I wouldn't say he's like, I don't know, who's like a character that would work like that? It's a character that's stronger when other characters are around them, or like is made stronger by, I would say maybe like, I don't know, an Exodus card could work that way. I mean, the main card for that I feel like is like Universal Church of Truth, right? It's like if your allies are stronger, you in the middle would be even stronger based on their belief, right? It's like a reverse Gladiator. Not that Gladiator works this way, but you know, that would be kind of how you would explain it. But I guess, you know, They wanted to give somebody this effect, and they decided to give it to him because he is the Eternal known for being strong. Honestly, if they used this for Icarus, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I kind of see it. But I guess for some reason it's this. Do I think this card is good? Sure. It's going to slot into blue Marvel decks. I don't know. Cerebro 7s, but no, it would ruin a Cerebro deck. As far as like characters he works well with, I wouldn't say he works particularly well with Hercules. He kind of works well with Phastos, one of the other Eternals. I don't think they get along super well in Eternalsdom. Even in the movie, like Athena and him, I wouldn't say work super well together. Like most of the Eternals cards here either boost each other's stats or, well, that's not even true. Athena boosts stats and Phastos boosts stats, but those are the only two. Makari doesn't, and Circe doesn't. So you could say like he works well with them, and that's why he's got it. He works well with Athena, I guess. The only character that I think Gilgamesh knows that I like how he interacts with in Snap is Thor. Because Gilgamesh, when he was introduced into the Avengers, was kind of supposed to be Thor again. Like, he was just like Thor, and he was as strong as Thor, and he was supposed to be, you know, the new Thor. And it didn't really hit, but, like, he has a power that if you have Thor out already powered up, he goes out and he gets more powerful because of that. So that's kind of cool. But besides that, yeah, I don't think there's too much to this one. I think some of the other Eternals have more obvious and perhaps more interesting powers, but I think the problem with him is there's just not a whole lot of powers you can give him. Like, short of doing what they did with like Cull Obsidian or something, like if you made him like a 3/7 and just no stat stuff whatsoever, then maybe that would work. But I don't know. If I had to choose something for Gilgamesh to do, he likes to be on teams with other people. He likes to fight with other heroes. So I could say maybe he would be like a 3/8, but you could only play him in a lane where you have another character out. I don't know. That doesn't seem like that much of a downside. Let's say 3/7 with that. Because then he would be on the same level as, you know, a little bit less than a gladiator, and you would be somewhat limited by where you can play him. I don't know. I still don't love it. But I guess as far as like personality quirks, that's the only thing I can think of, is that he disobeyed and went and fought when he wasn't supposed to, and when the other Eternals weren't doing that. And he's really strong. What about, okay. How about this? How about he's a 5/10, but you can only play him on a lane that is all but full. He has to be the fourth card you play on the lane. So it is like he wants to get involved in scraps and stuff. He's very strong, but you can't just play him on his own lane and then he's good, right? Like something like that maybe would feel like a little bit more Gilgamesh-y. But again, his character's not that important and it doesn't have that much history, so there's not as much to go off of. But I do want to say one thing I'm kind of disappointed about. The Eternals, for all of their flaws, are cool looking. I would say Gilgamesh maybe less so than some of the other ones, because I don't really love any of his looks. I think the look he had when he was on the Avengers with all the stuff was kind of busy, and the full black kind of crossbones look he has, I just don't think is that memorable. But the other ones are like super memorable designs. You know, it's Jack Kirby, it's big, bold colors, big line circles, all that stuff. The Marvel Snap cards all appear to be based almost exclusively off of the characters in the Eternals movie, that was not incredibly successful, so I don't know why we're going only with that. So I hope that soon Marvel introduces Eternals variants that look like the characters do in the comics, because they look pretty cool. And that's not even counting like the esoteric stuff that's new, because that also looks gorgeous. But I'm just talking about like the old stuff, like the Jack Kirby historical Eternals or the Neil Gaiman. All those books look great. Yeah, I don't know. Put more variants in the game. You know, please. We do the gold pass now. Why are there not more variants? Anyway, I've been Nando. This has been fun. I hope you guys enjoy my videos. Share them around, like them and stuff. And I will see you next time talking about Athena.